Echeveria Romeo is arguably one of the prettiest succulents out there. At the same time, it is also one of the most frustrating to grow. Romeo is said to be a chance mutation of another Echeveria agavoides cultivar originating in a German nursery. It has since become one of the most popular succulents around the globe. Personally, I have a bit of a love and hate relationship with Romeo. I adore its beauty but get annoyed with how fussy it can be. It may be too much for beginners, though even seasoned succulent enthusiasts can have trouble growing it. Romeo typically grows as a single rosette to approximately 20 cm in diameter and 10 cm in height. The size will very much depend on the growing conditions. The leaves are wide at the stem and grow into a pointy tip. They are also quite thick and chunky. The surface is smooth and shiny, typical of agavoides Echeveria cultivars. Romeo is permanently a shade of pink, but the intensity will change throughout the year. It is at its brightest during the cooler months and palest in summer. Other factors such as sun exposure, pot material and size, or watering regime can also affect how colourful Romeo gets. Over the years, I've grown hundreds of Romeos in my nursery and found they can require a bit of special treatment to look pretty. Romeo is very sensitive to overwatering, rain and humidity, but at the same time grows best outdoors in plenty of light. It can be hard to find the perfect position for this succulent if you don't own a greenhouse. But there are some other options. A sunny covered patio should do the trick, or you can simply bring them under cover when it rains. They can tolerate being outdoors even in prolonged rain, but this is what they will end up looking like. All of these spots are a disease called edema. It is not lethal but affects the look. Many of you may think indoors would be perfect, but in my experience it is simply not bright enough to grow Romeo inside without the help of grow lights. In absence of frost, Romeo can technically be planted in the garden and surprisingly doesn't look all that bad. It is still very likely going to have a few spots, but if the position is sunny and on a slope, it should be fine. When growing in the ground, you can help it get established by mixing any type of potting mix with the garden soil. By cultivating and mixing in a bit of potting mix, you'll add nutrients and improve the soil structure, making it easier for the plant to spread its roots. Romeo is one of a few plants that may be better off root bound to a degree. Basically, root-bound plants would have replaced the potting mix with roots, and as a result, water will drain very fast as there is no potting mix soaking it up. Because Romeo is so susceptible to edema and fungal disease, this can actually reduce and/or stop them completely. It is still, however, good to check on the roots every now and then due to root mealybugs. Personally, I repot Romeos into only slightly bigger pots than their current ones. This will keep them somewhat root bound but will add nutrients for slow growth. Repotting is best done in the growing season. Late spring is ideal. With succulents like Romeo, good quality succulent potting mix should be used. Succulent potting mix will have the right pH and nutrients tailored to succulent plants. For extra drainage, you can add 5 to 10% of a drainage agent such as pumice, perlite, coarse sand or lava rock. Watering Romeo can be a bit tricky as it needs to be fairly dry, but at the same time also should have some water every now and again. The golden rule of watering when the potting mix dries out can be followed with tiny adjustments. You can add another week or so after the potting mix is dry before watering again. Although I don't personally like waiting for leaves to go wrinkly, Romeo is an exception. Once the leaves are soft and no longer plump, Romeo will definitely be happy to see water. And finally, I don't water them at all during the winter months. Thanks to those chunky large leaves, Romeo is incredible during droughts and can go without water for months. But in my opinion, it should not be left too dry for too long as it may start losing leaves eventually. Temperature-wise, it will tolerate heat well over 40 degrees Celsius, though it should be moved out of the hot sun once it gets this hot. If exposed to direct sun during extreme heat waves, the leaves can suffer sunburn and the plant could die, especially when planted in dark-colored pots. Romeo is not very frost hardy. It can get frostburns and even die when temperatures drop a few degrees below the freezing point for too long. If you only get occasional frost, use frost cloth to protect your succulents. During deeper frosts or snow, bring this plant indoors for the duration. Our Romeos get exposed to temperatures down to about 1 degree Celsius during winter without any issues. You may have been wondering why Romeo is such a pricey plant. The reason is it's not very easy to propagate. It rarely grows offsets and leaves don't often produce a leaf baby. Some years ago I did an experiment with about 100 leaves of both Romeo and Rubin and the results were less than 10% of leaves made it. I'll link to the video in the description. It is very old, super cringy video but somewhat interesting to watch. You may also wonder how I got my hands on hundreds of Romeos since it's so difficult to propagate. The answer is tissue culture. Tissue culture is the only reason many cultivars such as Romeo are available. Without it, there would only be a few around since the original was a mutation of just one plant. It also means that the genetic pool of Romeo is tiny and I do sometimes wonder if that isn't the reason for all of its troubles. Mutations happen all the time, both in the wild and in cultivation, but in my opinion, if Romeo was a wild mutation, it would not survive. But all of this is purely speculation on my part. There is a way to force Romeo into producing new growth and that is topping, aka beheading. I would strongly recommend to do this with more mature plants of about 10 centimeters. If there's not enough leaves and height, the top part can disintegrate. Beheading is best done with a thin but strong string such as tooth floss or fishing line. Once you've successfully separated the top, leave it in a clean, dry, shaded but bright spot for a few days so the wound heals. When the wound is dry, the top can be potted in succulent potting mix. Roots should appear within a month. The bottom part with the root ball and a few leaves can be placed in a greenhouse. New growth should emerge in a month or two. The number of new heads is anyone's guess. You can get 1, but I've also gotten 3. Any more than that is unusual. The best time to do any propagation is during the growing season, but in my opinion, late spring is ideal as it's not yet too hot. Not only is Romeo susceptible to disease, it's also very much loved by all manner of pests. Aphids are most common when inflorescences start to appear and can sometimes spread to the rosette. They spread fast and should be eradicated immediately after you spot them. Pyrethrum spray works very well for these little buggers. While Romeo is not a mealybug magnet, it is quite high up on their menu. Watch out for any white streaks, cottony sacs or malformed growth. Root mealybugs love root-bound plants and can go undetected as they live in the soil. This is not good news as keeping Romeo root-bound is beneficial as we discussed earlier in the video. I'd advise to check the roots at least once every growing season. Bigger pests such as snails, slugs, caterpillars and grasshoppers can sometimes attack too. If large chunks go missing, they are likely to be the culprit. The inflorescence on this plant is very pretty and typical of Echeveria. Flowers grow on tall stems above the foliage, forming an arch. More than one stem can grow simultaneously. The petals are pink, orange and yellow. More than 10 flowers can open on one stalk. Romeo usually flowers throughout spring, but this can depend on your location. All Echeveria are said to be non-toxic and safe for humans, dogs, cats and other pets and livestock. However, I would not advise eating them just in case. And that is all for today. I hope this video was useful and if you have anything to add or ask, you can do so in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you all next time.